Hello there, and welcome
Hello,
to the channel.
hello, hello, hello,
This is my brother, Dean McCollum.
hello,
He's
hello,
the first brother,
hello.
and he's going to be telling me about his experiences with the teachers in our family, and maybe some of his experiences with considering teaching as a gig. Um, so, Dean, you knew more of them than anybody, I think. You knew
More,
more of the teachers in our family than anybody.
how many teachers in our family?
Well, there was Grandma McCollum,
There's one,
Daddy,
two,
Aunt Ola,
three,
Uncle Sam,
four,
Aunt Pat.
five. I didn't
Mom
know.
taught for a year in Sudan.
Six,
Susie,
seven,
John,
8,
me,
9,
Jackie,
10,
Sammy.
11,
Who else?
Brian,
Brian, 12.
12,
Um, that's a pretty good number.
Orson,
Orson, 13.
13. Oh, that's a good number there. Let's stop there while we're ahead.
Okay, okay. So, is there any lesson that you particularly remember that stands out in your mind?
Any lesson? You
Well,
mean from class?
or from them. I mean, Grandma McCollum, you spent a lot of time with Grandma McCollum, and she is really the source. I mean,
Well, I learned to play solitaire from her.
oh yeah,
She used to play, she would sit and play solitaire for hours. And that's the one thing, that's the one game that I still play is solitaire. In
oh,
fact, I played about 10 hands here before you and I connected.
do
I
you?
don't win as often as she did.
Oh,
When you have a deck of cards, you can do little things that will up your odds of winning the solitaire.
right.
Like instead of dealing from the bottom, you can fill from the bottom. You know, there's things that you can do with cards that you can't do with a computer.
That's true. That's true.
No. And if all you got watching you is some little kid who doesn't know what's going on, it's,
Yeah.
I think she just liked to clear the deck, when she cleared her board, she'd like to have everything in order.
Ah.
So,
And you also knew Grandpa McCollum. I never knew him.
well, if you can say new, I mean, I have one vivid memory of Grandpa McCollum sitting in that great big old rocking chair. But no, I don't remember. I really don't remember that much about him at all. He was a very stern, stern character.
Really?
I mean, he was, I don't know if brittle is the right word, but he was, that's the way he came across to me.
Huh.
Because if you look at the pictures of him, he looks hard, you
Yeah.
know, and I think he was as hard as he looked. But as far as imparting any lasting knowledge to me, no, I don't have anything I can lay at his feet.
But you did do all the things that McCollum men are supposed to learn. You did go on hunting trips, and you
Well,
did.
yeah, but for me, that was not optional. I mean, it never occurred to me that that was optional. That was something that I remember when I first first started in school. Daddy pulled me aside one day in the morning with mother. They sat down and they said, "Now you're a teacher's kid, and so we expect you to set an example for the rest of the kids in the school.
Wow.
You know, we expect you to be top of the line. We expect you to, you should know the rules and you obey them. And you show the other students how it's done. And well, I took that to heart, you know. I mean, and that's the way I conducted myself in school for the most part. I mean, I wasn't, I was, I was the valedictorian. I was top in the class every time. But it wasn't because I was particularly talented. It was because I had the task laid upon me to be good, you know. So to be good, you had to study.
Yeah.
And so I studied I studied. When I got home, I would study. There was, of course, we got to play and all of that good stuff, but that all came after the studying was done,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And it was an expectation. It wasn't something that I could slide on, you
So
know.
what's interesting is John used to describe that you and he were opposites. You shared a room. Did
Yeah,
you?
we shared a room. Well, in fact, we shared a room for the whole time I was living with the family. We had one bedroom, and that was the boys' bedroom. And
Right.
when you came along, you got your bedroom, which was the used to be the parents' bedroom. You
Oh,
know,
okay.
we added on to that house, and you came along, and I think maybe that's why Daddy added on to the house. I can't remember accurately enough to know whether that was a driver or not. But once we got that house added on to, you got the old parents' bedroom. And John and I got a real, we got a real bedroom. When the first part of our lives, we were sharing, well, we slept in a little lean-to next to the house.
Yeah.
You know,
I remember
we
that.
had a bunk bed, and that, he slept on the bottom and I slept on the top.
Wow.
But
So I remember that house. Wasn't there a bathroom between the two bedrooms there? They were kind of across the hall from each other,
yeah,
and there was a bathroom in between.
yes.
Yeah.
And this was adobe house, so the walls were like foot and a half, 2 feet thick.
Yeah.
So we could get pretty noisy and not disturb the rest of the family.
And you did?
Well, we could. We
Okay.
not all the time, but we could.
And so you went to all through school there in Carrizozo, right? That
Yes,
was where you went to
yes. That's
school.
that's the only school system I was in.
And you knew Mr. Lawson.
I knew Lawson.
So Lawson was a math teacher there. And was he a good math teacher? Do you felt like he was a good math teacher?
Lawson was kind of like Daddy. He was all business, and yeah, he was a good math teacher, I guess. I mean, I made the grades for him, so I guess he was a good math teacher. I mean, I could pass his tests and stuff. Lawson wasn't, Math was not a particularly touchy-feely subject, and Lawson wasn't a particularly touchy-feely teacher. Uh, I've told the story about him throwing the eraser, haven't I? Don't you remember that?
I don't.
I used to sit in the back of Lawson's class. I was allowed to do that because I was one of his better students. And it was a late spring day, and I was sitting in the back row, and I just went down and I rested my eyes for a couple minutes, and all of a sudden I heard this wham from behind me, and I turned around, and Lawson had taken an eraser, a chalk eraser, and thrown it at me, and he went right over my head and hit the chalkboard behind me on the wall. And I looked, and there was this great big white chalk mark where that eraser had hit. And I picked it up, and he made me bring it back up to him. never said a word. I mean, he never, he didn't chew me out. He didn't say, he just, bring the eraser back. And I got the message, wake
Don't
up.
go to sleep.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever hear John talk about when they moved to Estancia? He was a senior. You
Yeah.
were already in college,
Oh, yeah. I was going.
and he had not done as well with Lawson. Lawson did not like him, and he got to Estancia, and he didn't think he was much of a math student. It turned out he was a better math student than everybody else in the school because he'd had Lawson.
Well, Lawson was, how to put this? Like I said, he wasn't touchy-feely, and he was good, big on memorization.
Mhm.
Memorize this, memorize that, remember the steps. We used to go up to the board a lot as a class and go through the steps of the problem that we were dealing with. His, I think, I don't know if I had him for geometry, but I know he was an algebra. He taught the algebra, and he would. I mean, it was always show your work, always show your work, everything. And that was, I mean, I think a lot of teachers may cut corners by not insisting that you see the work, but he'd go through every paper and he'd watch it. And if you missed a step, or he could spot where you went wrong, in trying to solve the problem. And I respected that. I liked having that kind of detailed watch, that kind of detailed observation of what you were doing.
Well, I had never had him, but I did have one teacher that you had. I had Miss Aker.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, Miss Aker.
uh-huh.
Wow, I didn't realize she had gone that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miss Aker was the first grade teacher. Yeah, John escaped from Miss Aker. The first day of class, he and a buddy of his, that grade school, we had door to the main hallway, and then there was a door in each room. There was a door out to the playground for playground time. And John went to school the first day, and mother tells a story about being at the house, and John coming through the front door. And she said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I escaped." And a buddy of his had gone out the playroom door just as soon as class started. They were gone. They escaped. I don't know how that got resolved between mother and Ms. Aker, but yeah, he did that.
Well, I remember her being scary looking. Um,
Somebody's gonna have to answer that. Uh-oh. This is a risk of spam here.
oh no, not spam.
Yeah, yeah, it's a risk of spam.
Yeah. So I remember Miss Aker looked scary, but she was very nice. However, she did use the ruler. Did you
Yeah.
ever have the ruler?
She was kind of like Lawson in that respect. No, I'm not going to do it. See the hang up. Anyway, uh, no, Ms. Aker, she never used a ruler on me because she could terrify me, but just by looking at me,
Yeah.
that was if Lawson was hard, she was hard too. She was a hard looking woman. And all she had to do was look at me, and I was like, okay, um, you know,
I'm straightening out. It's right
yeah,
happening right now.
straighten it out.
I got rulered once. Kyla and I would not stop talking. And so we had to go back and get rulered. It
Hmm.
was terrifying. It was
I bet
awful.
it was. I bet it was.
But you also did the May Day celebration there at Carrizozo Elementary, right? They did a
Uh,
maypole, didn't they?
Yeah, we did the maypole, danced around the pole, and we weaved the stuff. The thing that got me, I don't didn't mind doing the weaving, but then we had to unweave it. We danced around the maypole and we wove all these colored streamers and stuff. And then when we got it all wound up, then that made us turn around and unwind it. What? Yeah, yeah, we did the maid ceremony.
Well, see, I never did the maypole because we moved. We moved when I was in second grade, so I never got to do the maypole.
I think I did it like, I don't know, 3, 4 times anyway. They had pretty much everybody in grade school do it. Maybe they exempted the first graders because first graders were concentrating on escaping. But you know,
Yeah.
I think I guess maybe they started in second grade. But yeah, I that and then never mind.
Did you ever have Daddy in the classroom? Did he ever was
Daddy
he
was my driver's ed teacher.
Yeah, he taught me driver's ed too.
Yeah, he was the
What
driver's ed teacher.
what struck you about that? Was there anything in driver's ed that was interesting?
I remember one time just driving down the road, Daddy was sitting there like this, and then all of a sudden he goes, like that. Of course, startled me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me and says, just checking to see your replacements.
Oh, yes, he made me change a tire. He made me learn to change a tire. I had to check the oil and I had to change a tire, and I could do it. But just the other day, I tried to change the tire on the Toyota and I couldn't do it
Because
because the jack that the Toyota company provided with that car is crap. And I was trying to hoist the car up and it fell off the jack.
there you go.
The
See,
jack,
you should have set the brakes.
I set the brakes.
Then it shouldn't have fallen off the jack.
I agree. I had to go get the little. Here's the thing, I have that 30-year-old, 29-year-old Ford pickup, and the jack in that little Ford pickup, it's a little jack. It's only about that tall.
Mhm.
It's hydraulic.
Oh, it's not a scissor jack?
No, it's a hydraulic jack.
Yeah.
So you don't have to muscle it up at all. You just place it and wind it, and it
hmm
lifts the car.
hmm
And I'm like, that's 30 years old. Why aren't they providing that kind of jack with these new cars? Instead of a jack like a scissor jack, where you have to muscle the car up. And the worst part was this. Not I finally got it up. I finally got the car up. I got to the point where the lug nuts were off and I couldn't get the wheel off the whatever it is you call that thing that you get the wheel off of. What do you call that?
The wheel.
I couldn't get the tire off the wheel.
No, you couldn't get the wheel off of the axle. You
Okay.
could, you
Okay.
could,
Yeah. The wheel off the axle. I couldn't do it. I had to call Orson because I physically could not get it off there. And he had to kick it to get it off there.
well, that's probably what you should have done.
I can't kick as hard as Orson.
So
He's a man
anyway,
in his 30s. I'm a woman in her 60s. I can't kick that hard.
are you really in your 60s?
Yeah. Yes. I'm 13 years younger than you.
I must be in my 70s.
Mm. Yep.
Huh.
And I'll tell you something. I've changed the tire or tried to change the tire on that Toyota, and I've tried to change the tire on that truck. It's easier to change the tire on the truck than it is on the Toyota.
Hmm. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
That Japanese stuff, now you worry about the stuff made in China, but used to be it was made in Japan that you had to worry about.
yeah, yeah. Everything was different sizes too. But you also learned other stuff from Daddy. You learned like building trades from Daddy, right? Or sort of.
Not much. Daddy and I stayed away after, I'm not sure when I started, but there was a time when I stayed away from what Daddy did, like carpentry. I took a class from Sadler actually in wood shop. You know, I spent a whole year, and the end result was a two-story letter holder. That was what I built. That was my project. They passed me because I could pass all the exams. But I mean, my carpentry skills are next to nothing, and I will do anything to get out of doing any carpentry work. Daddy was the carpenter. I mean, I hunted with Daddy, and I learned the hunting business, and I liked working with horses and that stuff. But no, I was Daddy was a plumber. He did a lot of plumbing. Daddy was a carpenter. Okay, he did a lot of carpentry. He was a builder. And yeah, he had me work with him on that house. But it wasn't because I was saying, Daddy, let me help you, let me help you. No, it was more like, okay, son, get up, get dressed. We're working today, you know. And so yeah, I learned a few things just that because there was no way out of it. But it's like the ham radio stuff. I stayed away from that. I stayed away from it deliberately. I didn't want to be in that with him. And
Huh.
I think it's because I didn't want to try to fill his shoes. The only time I ever tried to follow him was when I went into the Marine Corps, because I thought, this is what a McCollum does. This is what Daddy's son does. And I remember the day I signed up. That night I spent all night awake. I couldn't sleep. I was so damn scared of what I'd done, you know. But it was done then, and I've had, that's a different topic. That has
Yeah,
nothing to
yeah.
do with teaching. Okay. But that was one thing. And when I tried to go into teaching, I realized that I, I don't have the temperament to stand in front of a class and try to teach. I tried to do that, and I had a bunch of sixth and seventh graders, middle school, and I could present the material, but I had this real serious problem. I'd come out of the Corps before I went into that, and I had this serious problem. I expected those kids to respect the to respect the position of teacher, not necessarily me personally, but the position of the teacher. I expected them to do as I said when I said. And that's an idiot thing for a grown man to expect out of teenage kids. They don't respect the position of teacher. If you want their respect, you've got to get their personal respect. They have to respect you as a person. And that's not what I was at. That's not what I was after. I didn't, I wanted them, and that's the way I'm built. That's the
Yeah.
way I'm built. And it just didn't mesh. It didn't work.
Hmm. Well, it's kind of interesting. John and I disagreed a lot about different things in teaching. We talked about lesson planning some. John was like, no, I don't. No, I don't do that.
Yeah, I was not especially, I mean, I could throw together a lesson plan, but that was not, I usually I would just work sequentially, because
Right.
I was teaching math to kids. And, you follow the textbook, it's a sequential development and lesson plans, I didn't make plans. I still don't make plans. It's a very sore spot in in this household. I don't make plans. The extent of my plans is, okay, I'm gonna go get gas tomorrow.
Right.
I'll buy a plane ticket next week. That's my plan. That's,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the extent of it.
Well, you also knew Aunt Betty. Now, supposedly Aunt Betty taught as well.
Well, really,
Yeah.
I wasn't,
Yes. I guess she taught like mom. I think she taught for a year because mom taught at that Sedan school for a year before she got married to daddy.
yeah, I'm aware of that. I don't keep it in mind very much. She was a teacher.
Yeah. And Aunt Betty supposedly taught too. But there's no two personalities more different than Aunt Betty and Mother, except maybe Aunt Betty and Aunt Ola.
Yeah, I I don't know. Well, Mother always had a high opinion of teachers.
Yeah.
She thinks it's a noble calling, and I don't disagree with her. But it helps to have that kind of a backup in the family.
Yeah.
It helped Daddy, I know,
Yeah. Oh,
because
yeah.
you know I'm sure he was sensitive to the nuances of teachers doers do and teachers can't teachers the people who can't do teach.
Right.
And that's I know he must have gotten that from his brothers, at least somewhat, because I could see them when they get together. I could see them, you know feeling him out, seeing what do you know.
Well, Uncle Ben, yeah, I don't know that Uncle Kenneth was that way as much, but Uncle Ben definitely was that way. Uncle Ben was that way with everybody.
Oh yeah.
He figured he figured if you weren't Uncle Ben, you were kind of stupid.
In Ben's world, that's the way it was.
Um, so the other thing that I thought was kind of interesting, Grandma Jones was not a teacher per se, but she was a babysitter, so she did do a lot of teaching. She taught little kids little things. And what I remember was she had a box of old pill bottles. She had a box of old pill bottles with the childproof caps, and she gave them to us as kids so that we knew how to open
Got an open pill
all,
bottle.
all the childproof caps.
Well, there's teaching and then there's teaching.
Yes. Well, I learned a lot from Grandma Jones. I think you know that. I learned a lot from her because I spent summers with her. And she was for me, she was really easy to stay with because she kind of, as long as I behaved, I got to do what I wanted to do. And so she,
Yeah,
the only thing that I had to do, the thing I had to do, I had to go with her twice a day to the nursing home to feed Grandma Great. And that was an education in itself.
yeah, yeah.
Because I did not like that. I did not like doing that.
Well, here you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned a lot more than I realized I learned watching that.
Yeah,
And I'm learning things too. I'm learning like a sympathy that I didn't understand some of what was going on, obviously, because I was too young to really know.
yeah.
some of that, but I can remember one time we went and Grandma Great had had a dream, a bad dream about TD. And TD had epilepsy and he was her youngest. And she'd had this dream that TD had died and she kept crying about it. And Grandma kept saying, Mother, TD's not dead. He's not dead. He's okay. But she wouldn't believe her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there was a time that we went and she didn't recognize Grandma. And Grandma, I mean, there was only one other person older than Grandma in her children. That was Aunt May. Aunt May was the oldest and then Grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't recognize Grandma. And that just broke Grandma's heart. She was sitting there by her mother crying. And I was standing there going, oh, brother, this is awful.
Mm-hmm. Too much drama.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it gets pretty dramatic.
So far, I haven't had to have that tears. But it is upset. One of the things that's upsetting about it is that a lot of things that I wish I'd asked about, I didn't. I didn't ask about certain things that I wish I had asked about because I don't know them and I would like to know.
Welcome to the club.
What do you wish you could ask if you could ask? What do you think you
I
might
would
ask?
like to have sat down with Daddy and had a long, frank discussion about war.
You
Because
never
I can remember Daddy. I never thought of Daddy was a hero. Daddy was my hero. Okay. Daddy, that's the niche he occupied in my life. But I remember one time Daddy and I were going to a basketball game and Daddy had the cash box for the gate and we were walking down the alley toward the highway and I looked at him. It was right about dusk. I looked at him and he was nervous. I mean, he was, and I don't remember ever seeing Daddy nervous, you know, for any length of time. But he was nervous that day. And I remember asking him, I said, "Are you afraid of the dark?" You know, I was having trouble figuring out what he was nervous about. And he didn't look at me, but he said, It's not the dark I'm afraid of, son. It's what's in the dark, you know. And that it took me years to really understand where that statement came from, you know, but it came from World War II. And that's when and the more, every time I think about that, I realize just how lasting those experiences are. I remember watching Daddy one time, he was out in the shed and he was sitting in front of his radio. He used to be out in his shed in front of his radio all the time. And I remember looking at him and he was bent over his desk like this listening to the radio, but you could see him massaging. He was, you could see he was going through something. And I didn't interrupt him and I didn't ask him, but I could tell that whatever it was that was going through his head was working on him. I mean, it was a memory and he was trying to deal with it. And Daddy was at a disadvantage from a lot of vets in that he couldn't, as the high school principal in a small town, he couldn't afford to try to deal with that stuff. He had to stuff it, he had to appear okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a few things I wish, but at that time I couldn't do it. I couldn't have, even if I had known what what I would be doing, I still couldn't have done it. I mean, it was just not the right time.
Well, John told me once that he regretted 2 times in his life. He regretted driving away from Grandpa Jones the last time because Grandpa Jones was telling him about his war experiences. And John was late for something somewhere else, and he kind of just got away from him.
Yep.
And he regretted that, and it was almost the same thing the last time he spoke to Daddy. So he had a very similar set of regrets. I know that I and maybe that's why I so much wanted to do this, um, was to get some of this recorded at least, because I certainly wanted to talk to John more about teaching because he had a lot of opinions about it, like me. But even more than that, like after he died, I'd go and watch him on his YouTube channel and think, well, at least I get to hear his voice some. He doesn't have a lot of stuff on there, but I get to hear him talk every once in a while. So that's I don't know why, but I find it comforting.
There's that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look at this. We've talked and filled the time, and it's time for the interview to be finished. Was it
Yeah, and
okay?
I don't know what I gave you for about teaching. I gave
You
you
gave me a
family.
lot, actually. You gave me a lot. And you were such a good sport to do it. I really do appreciate you doing it, Dean. It's nice of you to have done it.
You're welcome.